This is Hannibal here from thehannibaltv.com, and I'm going to do a quick review of the Bam Bam Bigelow Dark Side of the Ring. I have to admit, I was never a Bam Bam Bigelow fan. Sid speaks highly of him. A lot of people speak highly of him. DDP speaks highly of him. Cool to see him in the episode talking about their days in New Jersey and each of them seeing each other make it and kind of like marking out for each other that the local people have made it. But I honestly can't tell you one Bam Bam Bigelow match that stands out to me other than the Lawrence Taylor one. And I congratulate him on WrestleMania 11. But to me, that was the point where I stopped finding wrestling entertaining. 10, I mean, I'm old school, man. 1 to 10 were my favorite WrestleManias. 11 was the first time that I didn't really care for any of the matches. And I think Meltzer put it very well that WrestleMania was more of a publicity stunt than like a wrestling fan WrestleMania. And I know the Attitude Era popped later on, but I never, after the first 10, I never really got interested in a WrestleMania again, to be perfectly honest. The Hogan Rock one was good. But, yeah. Anyways, what I found interesting about this, I didn't realize Bam Bam had been signed so young to WWE in his early 20s. And how I knew that he had had that Survivor Series match with Hogan. But I didn't know that he did a whole house show tour with Hulk Hogan and tag team partnered with him regularly. No wonder he had so much dressing room heat, and I'm sure a lot of it got to his head. And I'm sure it was hard to handle, but I've watched several shoot interview clips of him since The Dark Side, where he seems like a very cool guy. And him talking about being 45, 60 days in a row on the road, going from just being like pretty quick out of wrestling school to that, I could see how that could like take your toll physically and mentally on someone too. But it's interesting to think that had he continued to tag team with Hogan when he was young, would he have had a feud with Hulk Hogan at one of the WrestleManias? Because that would have made sense. And he was over. I had both of the Bam Bam Bigelow figures. Like, even before I knew what wrestling was, I became a fan in like 89. So again, I only saw him on tapes in 88, but I remember the toy of Bam Bam Bigelow before I even knew what wrestling was, seeing it. He had such a crazy look. But the rumor and innuendo is Andre the Giant beat him up in the ring, and he went to the back after that WrestleMania, or after that Madison Square Garden match with Andre, and left. And I heard Bruce Pritchard say on Bruce Pritchard's podcast that it may have just been a test from Andre, because Andre tested Warrior like that numerous times, but Warrior fought back, and Warrior kept wrestling Andre. And I think Warrior said it, and I believe it might be true, that Andre may have put Warrior over more than anyone else in WWE, because they had a whole house show run together where Andre was letting Warrior slam him, and Andre was getting beat by Warrior all the time. But I'm not going to digress into that. Everything seems to indicate there was backstage issues. Lanny Poffo claimed he backed Bam Bam Bigelow down backstage in an interview with me, which I did put a compilation of wrestlers talking about Bam Bam in the description. But I don't believe for a second, first of all, Lanny is not a real fighter. I've seen him in situations where fights have almost happened with fans and stuff at restaurants and backstage and stuff on various Great North Wrestling tours, and he's out of there. Like, even if you watch the Terry Funk press conference, where that was a work, guys, that was Terry Funk's idea, you can see when it starts to get intense, look in the background, Lanny is like pushing himself against the wall. He wants no part of it. So I fully believe that his story about backing Bam Bam down is just because Bam Bam didn't want to heat with Macho Man, who was fairly crazy legitimately, and if there was any issue with Lanny, obviously, it wouldn't have been good politically or any other way with Macho Man. Jacques Rougeau tells a story in later years after Bigelow was rehired that supposedly he was picking on Dink, who was Tiger Jackson, and Jacques had a talk with him, and that was the end of it. I have heard that. Carl Willett also confirmed that with me. It's cool seeing all of Bam Bam's kids in this. He seemed like a good family man in the interviews I've seen. There's a shoot interview with him, with one of his kids. I think his daughter's pretty cute for the beast from the Middle East. I was shocked at that. The sons both look like they could be wrestlers. They all seem really nice and really proud of their dad. So this was one of the sadder ones. A lot of them are sad. I don't think there's one Dark Side of the Ring that isn't sad. A lot of I don't agree with how a lot of them are manipulated, but I didn't know much about Bam Bam, so I was pretty neutral going into this. But it was sad to see that kind of drugs got the better of Bam Bam, and not only did he kind of lose his wrestling fame towards the end, but he lost his family, being the family man that he once was. To me, that was very sad. It is cool that he did have I didn't see much of his ECW run. I did remember, obviously, the Taz famous going through the ring, but I do remember his comeback in WCW. He was over in WCW. I was a WCW fan. I remember him. I didn't know that he had so many personal issues in WCW that supposedly, according to this, they had him sit out the end of his contract. But yeah, overall, I never really had an opinion on him because I never met him. I don't think I've ever even seen Bam Bam Bigelow live for whatever reason. But for whatever reason, I liked his look and everything. I remember his feud with Dink, but for whatever with Doink rather, not the Matt Bourne Doink, but the Ray Apollo Doink. That was like one of the lowest times in WWE. That was awful those days. But yeah, it was cool to like know the other side of Bam Bam, that he was really a tough guy from New Jersey that was a good football player and amateur wrestler and made it, but fame coming to you isn't always a good thing. And he passed away at 44. Supposedly, according to the toxicology report, it seemed to be from a mix of pills and cocaine. They didn't really get into too much of his cocaine use in this. I've heard him bring it up in interviews, but sad stuff. And I've heard him talk about other wrestlers going into rehab. I don't know if he ever did. I don't know if he passed before WWE had their rehab program. But it's too bad that he's still not here, because I could have seen him. He would have been on the independent scenes doing well for a very, very long time. It's a horrible, horrible Dark Side of the Ring, as they all are. But one of the more entertaining episodes, because as I said, a lot of these stories I know. As the producers told me themselves, some of these stories they got from my own channel, but Bam Bam I was no expert on. Best big man of all time, I'll give to Vader. But Bam Bam was certainly athletic. Someone says he saw him as a kid team with Hogan live in Pittsburgh, and that was before my fandom, so I had no idea about that. But can you imagine being in your early 20s, getting a push with Hogan right after WrestleMania 3? Betrayed by Sin loved the ECW Bam Bam. The best time of ECW was around that time. Lanny was lame, yes. I like Lanny in some respects, and in other respects, he was a very negative person, a very arrogant person. But I'm not judging. Overall, I like Lanny, but I don't know. I don't know about that story about Bam Bam, and he told that story after Bam Bam was dead, and after watching this, I believe it even less. Bam Bam did have one MMA fight with Chemo, which Chemo talked about to me in an interview, which I think is in the Bam Bam competition. But I think, again, this was not too long before he died, and I think Rick Bassman actually set up that fight. So maybe we could ask Rick about this, more information about this sometime. But like, he was into his drug issues and his body was beat up by that time. I know Bam Bam claimed it was a work. Who knows with Japan? Chemo insisted it was real. But yeah, it wasn't a good performance, but it was in front of 60,000 people. Someone was at November to remember it, 97, when Shane beat him. Jason saw the match where Andre used a singlet to choke Bam Bam. I mean, Bam Bam, I don't think he liked Andre legit, because there's another story. He tells a story of Bam Bam, of Andre shitting on Bad News Allen in another story that's on the internet. And he says that he had diarrhea on Allen, and then he was like kind of stuck on him, because every time he moved, more of the diarrhea would slip out of his singlet, to the point where he was like embarrassed that the fans were seeing it, and Allen was like, "Get off of me." And of course, the famous story with Bad News and Andre was supposedly Andre called him the N-word once on the Japan bus, and Allen supposedly backed him down. So who knows? Grandma Daisy, I agree. Doink went from a great character to horrible, horrible character. And the most copied character of all time on the indies. They didn't talk about the motorcycle accident. I don't even know about the motorcycle accident. Tell us about it. Yeah, the shoot with Chemo. Chemo talks about it if you go to the link in the description. Grandma Daisy will put Viscera Vader up there with the greatest big man of all time. Someone says they heard Bam Bam needed to have his head re-tattooed because Hands of Stone knocked the tattoos off with a single punch. The head tattoo was the best thing he ever did, because obviously that helped him get hired real fast. Saving the kids' lives in the fire. Yeah, they told that story. So again, I never met him. And after hearing his kids talk about him and hearing wrestlers talk positive, wrestlers are always going to have different opinion of other wrestlers, depending on what competition they were to them. But to me, he seems like a nice guy. He seemed like he was a nice guy that sadly had issues that took him at 44. So he didn't even make 45 years old. And he left a family behind, and it seemed like he really liked his family. When I heard him talk about one of the reasons why he said he had initially left WWE, it was because he didn't like being away from his family so much. So whether they didn't get into whether the rumor and innuendo is that he did cheat, as pretty much all wrestlers did, other than maybe Ricky Steamboat. There's very few that. Trying to think of which wrestlers did not cheat on their wives, because in wrestling in the 80s, it was a thing. Like your hierarchy in the back would grow if you were a cheater. That's just the way that the morale of the business was. But I'm trying to think there. Maybe Adrian Adonis probably didn't cheat on his wife. There are some that didn't, but more did than didn't. Like, you wouldn't expect that Brett did so much, but you read Brett's book, and he had a different girl in every town. He always claimed to be a family man, so you never know. But whether he did or not, I don't doubt he loved his family. Because when you're on the road 60 days, you know what? It's not like you're living with your wife cheating on someone. I'm not saying it's right or not, but it's not like you're cheating with someone in the same town. You're a big celebrity, and you're getting those opportunities. But again, that's all hearsay. He never told me any of those stories. All I'm saying is, to me, he seemed like he legitimately loved his family. Tell me what you thought about him in the description or in the comments. But yeah, I would have to say this one was probably the one I liked the most of the season, because I had zero expectations for it. Hey, Jason, Blood Hunter versus Bam Bam would have been good. I agree. That would have been a good match. I'm not saying he wasn't a great wrestler. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying, for whatever reason, I never really saw him, other than in WCW, where he was more of a hardcore wrestler, in the Lawrence Taylor and Doink feuds of WWE, which I'm glad he probably made a crap load of money with Lawrence Taylor. And that was probably amazing for him. Congratulations to have that opportunity. But that, to me, was one of the worst WrestleManias ever. Someone said the WrestleMania, this guy liked the WrestleMania with Lawrence Taylor. I remember Mongo McMichael was one of the guys on the outside of that. Okay, so here we go. Bam Bam was in a motorcycle accident with a passenger who ended up in critical condition. So there you go. Thanks for filling us in. Again, they skip out a lot on these. They're 44 minutes. But yeah, sorry to his family that you lost your dad. And I wish the kids well. Hope maybe I'll interview some of the kids. Who knows? I'd like to. I'm out of here.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like